Today is February 12th and I am dressed like a bumblebee. Bzzz. I don't know. Anyway, so it's been a couple months since my last writing video or video of any sort, and yeah, a few things have happened with my writing since the last video came out, which was probably like November or December. And I am now on draft 5 of my story. I think when last we chatted I was probably on draft 3, maybe draft 4. So my word count at the end of my second draft was about 94,000. It is currently about 101,000. So I remember I was really happy when I finished that draft. It was still a bit of a ways from 100,000 because I really did not want it to go over 100,000. But look where I am. And I'm not too concerned about it because I know that in reading through my draft I found a lot of sentences, paragraphs, even just words in general that can go. So draft 2 was kind of like my new draft. Between April and August of 2016 I wrote this new draft, and then August and September of 2017 I challenged myself to rewrite the draft in 2 months, and I did that. And then since then I've been basically doing mini rounds of editing where I read through the draft, I make notes of a bunch of things that I want to change. It could be really small things like add a line where a character says this, which, you know, could help foreshadow something later, or it could even be like change, you know, a character's motivation. And that's probably about like the biggest that the edits have gotten. So most things have been pretty small, but there's been quite a few things that I've had to implement in each round of editing, which has been why my word count has steadily gone up. So I did that a couple of times with drafts 3 and 4. Draft 4, I actually listened to the draft out loud. So I found a way to do in Microsoft Word where you can, it's called immersive reading, and I think it's under maybe the review tab. So I had it reading it out loud to me, and then I had my writing notebook for this story, and I was just taking notes. I found that playing Candy Crush while I have this thing reading out loud to me keeps me focused on what I'm listening to, versus like if I have it reading out to me, or even if I read it myself, I find my mind wandering about other random things. So Candy Crush strangely keeps me focused. And then I went in and I did what I call implementation edits, which is basically where I take all the notes that I made and I implement those notes into the story. And so once I did that, I made a new document, draft 5. So draft 5 is where I'm at now, and that was when I was working on draft 5. I kind of thought that, okay, the edits that I'm doing now are going to be basically last final edits, and that draft 5 is going to be line editing. So basically looking at my sentence structures and seeing, is there a better way to word this? Is there a shorter way to word this? You know, is there a way to, how many, like, you know, there's a lot of words that you use when you're writing that are called, I guess, filter words, and there's different names for them. Weasel words. Basically, they're words that don't need to be there. Most commonly, some words are that, just, and even words that you can kind of work around, like was, or any passive structure. Basically, any, how can you improve the prose of the story? So I thought that's what draft 5 was going to be about. And I was ready to start draft 5 maybe with a week left in January, a little more than a week left in January. But when I read chapter 1 and I was like, I think I need more time, more distance from the story before I jump back into it again. And so I took some time. I even like printed it out. Right here is my first, is it the first? Yeah, first 6 chapters of my story, which is part 1. And it's about 81 pages. The entire manuscript is 389 pages in this format, which is, you know, Times New Roman, double space, 12-point font, 1-inch margins. Yeah, so I needed some more time. Then I came back at the beginning of February, or rather the last day of January, and I read chapter 1 again, and I marked it up with different colored pens. It's been such a liberating feeling to just cross out an entire paragraph or an entire sentence. It's just like, yes. It's like just, you know, I don't even know. It's like if there's a pile of bricks on the ground, every sentence that you delete is 1 brick gotten rid of. Every paragraph that you delete is an armful of bricks that you get rid of until the pile is just done, like empty, it's gone, you know? I don't know if that was the best analogy, but that's what I got. Even once I finish marking up the chapter, I can look back through it and I see all these pink and blue markings and I'm like, oh, this is a beautiful thing. You know, I don't know if I'm gonna really understand it when I get back to transcribing these changes into the actual Word document on my computer, or I might even just be overwhelmed because even 1 page has so much pink, it's crazy. And so a few minutes ago I just mentioned like filter words and weasel words. One thing that I did before I printed it out, I created a list of all these words that I wanted to either get rid of from my story or cut down their usage as much as possible. You know, you have the word so, breath, look, might, even just words that I use a lot. Like I find my characters look at each other a lot, they smile a lot, and I'm so tired of those words. I'm just like, is there a different word that I can use here? Do I even have to mention that they look or smile? Like what's another way that I can portray that my character looks over here without actually saying that they look? So also line editing, you know, tackles things like that. And so I went through with my list of words and I did the find and replace feature in Word, and basically every one of these words, every time they showed up, now they're in red text. Because I knew that if I just had this list of words in my mind that I wanted to get rid of, I was going to miss a lot of them. And that way when I come to them, I'm like, okay, let me kind of step back and just focus on this sentence. How can I reword it to get rid of this word? Or to find a different way to say this word, like a synonym of this word. Right, so about a week and a half, I've only done 5 chapters. And part of that's because I'm doing an online class right now to get my Teaching English as a Foreign Language certificate. Because in the future, I want to give myself the opportunity, if I want to teach English abroad in other countries, I can do that. So basically, I'm also doing that class. I have homework for that class, so I've not been able to focus. And then I'm also working. And so, you know, my time is less. And so when I get home at the end of the day, I have to focus on my homework. Also, I did some traveling for the first half of January. And the jet lag, man, is so real. And so I've been going to bed at like 8 p.m. so I don't have much time in the evening when I come home to actually do my writing. And so today I am off, tomorrow I am off, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to go to Barnes & Noble tomorrow to like finish chapter 6. This is chapter 6. See, I even paper clipped each individual chapter, and I have a giant binder clip over the entire group of chapters. Can I just say, binder clips are one of my favorite things in the world. If the bigger the binder clip, the better. I just want to find a binder clip that's like 2 inches that I can put over my entire manuscript once I print it out. I just think that would be such a beautiful thing. Oh my gosh, it's so sad. You know, I got this binder clip for free because I just found it somewhere like several months ago. And I have been waiting for a reason to use it. And finally that I've printed this out, I don't think it's actually big enough. It's, you know, like, look how big it is compared to my 6 chapters. This is only 80 pages. I need a binder clip that can hold like 300 or 400 pages. We're getting way off track here. But, you know, these are also very important things. At the end of December, I sent the first 6 chapters of my manuscript to 2 friends who are also like writers and readers, and so I was like, okay, can you read my first 6 chapters and let me know what you think? And I had some questions for them that I wanted them to answer as well. So like, after you're reading these 6 chapters, would you continue reading? Why or why not? What's your opinion of the main character or the other characters? Does the world make sense to you so far? Because it's a fantasy world, so it's very important that it makes sense. What are your predictions? Were there any moments, lines, dialogue that took you out of the story or that didn't make sense to you? Things like that. One friend got back to me. She actually gave me some really good notes. Some things that I hadn't even considered. Something called Motivation Redaction Unit, I think it's called. I have to look more in to see what it is. But it's something about like how if you have a line in your story, but it's of something that describes what your character does, but it's not clear why they do that action, then it's an MRE. It's a motivation redaction unit or something like that. Basically, you have to show your character's motivation for doing that action. And I have some lines in here where like I didn't do that. So like that's really cool because I never like really thought about that before. So I'm glad that she made a note on that. The biggest thing that I was looking for feedback on, and also something that I had a couple of issues with myself, was the first chapter, which, you know, first chapter is super important in a book, probably one of the most important chapters, if only because it's the chapter that is supposed to entice readers to keep reading. My issue with the first chapter, and my friend also pointed this out, so it's good that, you know, I'm not crazy, this actually is an issue, is that it gets started a little bit slowly. Like, it picks up at the end of the chapter, once kind of like the purpose of the book gets initiated, and also once my character gets interacting with other characters, because the first part of the chapter, it's mostly my main character inside her head. Like, something is happening, but it's a lot of internal monologue. And so my issue with that is like, okay, I know that there's a lot of backstory here, and I know that there's a lot of internal monologue, but I was like, okay, that makes the chapter read more slowly. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, what pieces of background story and internal monologue can I get rid of, or just save for later? Because, you know, the first chapter, you don't need to be so much, at least with this story, you don't need to be so much in the character's head. You know, you can see with her actions who she is as a person. You can kind of get a sense of her personality that way. And you can also get a little taste of the world when you see her doing certain things. Like, for example, my main character has, you know, a power, but I don't need to explicitly say that she has a superpower. I just, you know, can show her doing it. And then, you know, the reader will be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. She has a power. This is a fantasy world, you know, but and then little clues of the world, like celebrating a holiday, or like, why are they celebrating this holiday? You know, how are these characters different from humans? Different, you know, different things like that. Basically, I have all the details here. I just have to get rid of enough backstory that the reader is enticed by what's going on. They're enticed by the mystery. They're beginning to ask questions, maybe getting a couple of answers back, but still not getting all the answers just yet. Because I think that's what I'm doing, is I'm giving too many answers and not allowing the reader enough of a chance to question things. As the chapter goes on, a couple more questions are answered. And so I just need to kind of let that happen and not bog down the beginning too much with background details and stuff that aren't necessary just yet. And in the second chapter, one of my characters is a little bit unlikable, which I can definitely see why. And so it's just trying to figure out how to make her a little bit more likable, which, you know, can be done by, oh, it's my writing notebook. I didn't realize this was in here. But anyway, like trying to figure out how to make that character more likable, which can just be done by, like, you can see her motivations are clear. You can see how she feels about my main character. It's just about her actions and her words. They portray her as sort of like a lot meaner than she actually is trying to be, or rather she seems meaner than I'm trying to make her be. Because this character is the mother figure to my main character. And in the first draft of this story, she and my main character were not on good terms at all. They hated, or my main character actually kind of hated her. You know, has spent years trying to get away from her, but had never succeeded. And so in this rendition, when I started writing the draft, I was like, given their situation and all that they've been through, there's no real reason why they wouldn't get along, you know? Like, of course, there'd be some, like, butting heads and stuff, but they wouldn't, like, my main character wouldn't hate her. She should see her as this mother figure. And so when I rewrote this draft, I was trying to bring in, okay, more of that love, more of that care for each other. But I guess I didn't get rid of all that hate. And so she does come across a little bit like that. So it's just about going through and cleaning up some of those actions. When I was marking up my printed copy, I did go back through and, like, change some of the lines, change some of her actions to make her more of a likable character. And so I think I'm doing pretty good with that. I will have to, once I type everything into the computer, I will have to, like, do one more read through of the first 6 chapters to see how they come across before I jump into part 2. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with chapter 5, or not chapter 5, with draft 5. I'm trying to finish draft 5 by the end of February, but I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe the middle of March, end of March, and I'll be able to move on to the next stage, you know, which could be draft 6. I'm trying to do that thing where I step back and try to actually re-see my plot, my story, my characters in a different way. Just trying to do that, give myself, like, one last chance to see, okay, is there anything that I think can change? Anything that I want to improve or take out? You know, is there anything that I want to change? And I'm trying to get away from that, oh, I don't feel like doing the work, or I don't feel like, or like, oh, it's fine the way it is, you know, especially if in the back of my mind I do kind of think about things like, this part could be different, but I'm maybe too afraid to try to tackle that sort of change. The other thing that I want to talk about really quick, because I know this video is probably getting really too long already, that I've been doing in the past month or 2 is working on my query letter. So I started with just writing up a rough summary. I wrote 2 versions. I wrote a long summary, like what you would see, you know, on the inside flap of a book or the back cover of a book. And then I wrote like a query letter summary, which would be significantly shorter. And that has been so difficult, trying to take this 100,000 word story and condense it into 200 words. For those of you who don't know what a query letter is, basically it's telling an agent who would represent your book to publishers what your book is about and whether, you know, try to convince them to request a full manuscript to read. It's only supposed to entice them to that next step. The query letter is not a synopsis. It doesn't need to say what your entire book is about. It only needs to say, like, maybe what the first part is about, what act 1 of your story is about. And so I've been trying to do that, but I feel like so much happens in act 1. Or rather, act 1 is about one part of the story, right? But then there's an event that happens sort of in the beginning of Act 2 that I can't... I started thinking about how there's an event that happens in Act 2 that I didn't think I could bring into Act 1 in any way, but I was just remembered, like, I had this idea earlier to, like, foreshadow that event a little bit in Act 1. Anyway, I'm sort of kind of doing this thinking out loud thing right now. I finally got to a query letter that I really liked, but then I went back and read it and I'm like, this thing jumps around so much. There's no flow to it, you know? I don't have time to process this sentence before the next sentence throws another, you know, I don't know, cannonball of information at me. And so it's been probably 2 or 3 weeks since I've looked at the query letter at this point, so that's a lot of distance, but I'm not ready to go back and look at it yet to see if I can make any revisions. But anyway, I'm not ready to send that off at this point anyway, even if it was perfect. I probably won't be ready to do that until, well, you're not supposed to send a query letter until your draft is like done, until your manuscript is done, so it's going to be a couple of months at least. So yeah, anyway, I think I rambled enough in this video. Hopefully you enjoyed an update on where I am with my story. Thank you guys so much for watching. Down below, if you guys are working on any manuscripts, any stories, any query letters, I don't know. Anyway, just let me know. I'd like to know. Give this video a like, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time. Toodaloo!